What up, y'all? It's TTAR, and today we're gonna be talking about something I've been wanting to talk about since Legends Year was announced. And here's the question: is the ultimate weapon secretly a Pokemon? An absurd idea at first, but I will explain it. So I've been going down this thought process of trying to figure out what the story of Pokemon Legends Year could be. Obviously, I made a couple videos on it, which it's a pretty crazy idea, but it's the idea of normal Pokemon versus the synthetic Pokemon, right? To tie into Mega Evolution, the DNA being in the symbol of the original X and Y. Mega Evolution is unanswered, right? So DNA and synthetic Pokemon playing a role somewhere. But along with that, another idea I was talking about in previous videos, which made me sound crazy, I understand, is the idea of, along with the X, Y, and Z legendary, that there's a fourth one, the A legendary. And this is what we're going to talk about in this video. Essentially, is the ultimate weapon the A legendary? Now let's talk about the ultimate weapon for a second. There's another way to take this, which I don't think pertains to this video, so I'll save that for later. But it's like this: the ultimate weapon is this curious machine that was able to take in Xerneas power and Yveltal power. So it's no normal machine by any means. And it's the launching of this weapon that created Mega Evolution. And two things don't really line up, right? I just made a video talking about Mega Xerneas and Yveltal, how they make sense to get Mega Evolution because apparently Mega Stones come from their energy. But it's also weird because what does life and death really have to do with Mega Evolution? I mean, Mega Evolution symbol has DNA. What, are you pulling out their life force rapidly so that they evolve? But what is the Yveltal side of the energy doing? How does Xerneas and Yveltal's power somehow convert into creating the Mega Stones? So yeah, this goes back to our discussion of normal versus like synthetic or artificial, right? And some kind of technology existing back in AZ's day that would allow for something like the ultimate weapon to be made. Theory or not, the ultimate weapon, this machine as they describe it in the flashbacks, existed 3,000 years ago. And if AZ, who's described to have been the one who built it, either he's a one-of-a-kind engineer in a Pokemon world, or this knowledge was ubiquitous or at least commonly known to some extent in Kalos. Here's when we get to the idea, right? The fact that the ultimate weapon can hold Xerneas and Yveltal's power. What if the ultimate weapon, you see, it just says that one day AZ got the tiny box and in his despair, he immediately went and started building a weapon. How did he come to the conclusion of building this weapon? What if this weapon was a blueprint that's always existed in some sense, and no one is smart enough or crazy enough to actually pull it off? Which, remember, this is the peak of civilization. It's the classic tale of the moment a world gets civilized enough, they blow themselves up and restart. It's like every 6,000 years or something. I want to point note at the fact that the ultimate weapon doesn't function like a simple explosive or rocket launcher. It specifically, for some reason, is compatible and powered by Xerneas and Yveltal's power. So imagine something like this, right? In the older days, right before AZ's time, when you have these elders that are all technologically advanced in Kalos, that one, they held Xerneas and Yveltal to high regard, but they didn't like that Xerneas and Yveltal go to sleep every 1,000 years. And to ensure their own safety, as naturally you would, they wanted to construct something that would utilize their power. And so they created the blueprints for this ultimate weapon that actually feeds on the energy, doesn't take the energy, but feeds on it. And maybe something like they made this weapon in a smaller form and realized its destructive capabilities, so the weapon was never made again. Then you get to AZ's time and he makes the weapon full scale in his rage, gets his float back to life, blasts everything. But the weapon still lingers. And that's why I use the keyword feeds. What if this ultimate weapon, if you successfully feed not just life energy and death energy, but the maximum amount, as in Xerneas and Yveltal, that it actually completes itself and turns into something. A weird thought, right? But I want to tell y'all a couple things. So first off, when they showed the ultimate weapon in flashbacks, it very obviously looks metallic and weapon-like. Especially the way he fires, it looks like some kind of nuclear weapon. But you notice in the modern day, when the ultimate weapon is uncovered by Lysander and his crew, it looks like a blooming flower that's crystally. Looks a lot like the sundial. And this is something that would be explained in ZA as well, what the sundial really is. And it's so crystally, it starts to make you think Terrasto, but we're not going to get into that because we don't want to cross over regions unless Game Freak decides to do it first. But you see, something that crystally starts to look less mechanic and soulless and more like a flower that could bloom. And then we already know it can take and handle Xerneas energy and Yveltal energy. And it just sits there. What if that's what the ultimate weapon really is? Now, the other route that I wanted to go down that I don't think I can in this video is the idea that this ultimate weapon originally was a Pokemon. And so now that it's in this recreated flower form, if you fed it enough power, kind of like Necrozma, it could get the fuel it needs to rebirth itself. Which, a very bad example, well, it's a good example, but it's just not very relevant. Think of Flowey from Undertale, right? He's a flower, but if you give enough power back to him, he reverts to what its original appearance is. And what I'm saying is, imagine this flower is the A Pokemon. So imagine, right, in the course of Pokemon X and Y, despite Zygarde being this Superman that protects Earth from any disaster, Lysander uncovers the weapon. But not only is it uncovered in X and Y, but it's launched. Zygarde was so worthless that it was able to launch before he could do anything. Now, to Zygarde's credit, I'm imagining if we did not beat Lysander there, after he launched it, Zygarde would have pulled up and beat him up. Stopped everything. But I mean, what kind of information network do you have, Zygarde? Your cells are everywhere. How did we get there before you? You should be the... Anyhow, the point I'm trying to make is, what if Zygarde wasn't gonna step in unless it got to the absolute peak of danger, which was, you see how Lysander got Xerneas or Yveltal there? If he was about to feed the ultimate weapon, Xerneas or Yveltal, maybe instantly Zygarde would have stepped in. But until that moment, he was waiting. And the reason I point to this is what I just said earlier. Look at the logo. Pokemon ZA with the hyphen in between. If you were to think of the ultimate weapon as this dangerous entity that Zygarde specifically is waiting for to ensure it never resurfaces again, the logo kind of makes sense as the two clashing. And something cool that could spawn from this Legends ZA game is a similar thing as Legends Arceus, where depending on a choice in your game, maybe there's two versions to this A legendary. A version if you feed it the life Pokemon Xerneas and it would take on its own life form, or you feed it Yveltal and it takes on its own death form. There's two ways to bring it back to life. And this is the kicker, right? At the end of the day, what they chose to make the ultimate weapon was not something weapon-like. It was a flower, like a literal life form. I would imagine this A legendary to be this flower-based, really angelic looking Pokemon, regardless of life or death you feed to it. And I think it'd be so cool if the game being called Pokemon Legends ZA is because it's Zygarde's old enemy. And this is why I also like the idea that it was a Pokemon originally that would have a name that starts with A, that then at some point is defeated by Zygarde, and it's using the core of that Pokemon that these elders of Kalos and all base their invention off. So in order to create a weapon that could take Xerneas and Yveltal's power for their defense they wanted, they had to use the core, the heart of that Pokemon. And so that danger always lingered from the start because of that. And so you feed it enough of that power back and it comes back to life. The concept of that ultimate weapon secretly being a dormant Pokemon the whole time, it's so badass to me, and I really hope that would happen. Anyhow, make sure to shank that like button. Let me know your thoughts. I could go on with this idea. There's more to this A Pokemon that I have painted in my head, and for now we're getting rid of the B and C idea because just F them, bro. We don't need a Pokemon to counter Xerneas and Yveltal. The A is the main focus, and this is what Zygarde is always waiting for that thing to threaten the ecosystem. Well, to make sure it doesn't. But yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Take care.